Welcome to Growing Younger podcast, where we guide you through your journey of reaching your fitness goals after 40.
Belly fat after 50. Why it's not the same any longer than the fat you had in your 30s. Hey guys, this is Alex here, Alex Blazewski from Growing Younger Fitness. So the topic of today's podcast is we're going to talk about fat, okay, and specifically how your fat stores change as you get older. And we're going to discuss someone who is in their 50s, how their fat is likely to be quite different than when they were much younger. We're also going to discuss the health aspects of it and how it will impact your longevity and overall health and fitness. So first of all, I want to break down and clarify that there are different types of fat in your body. So there's your regular fat or subcutaneous fat, which is basically the type of fat you see in your arms and legs, and it's the fat that you usually have under your skin. Now, when we're younger and we're both male and female, we tend to have more of the regular fat. So if we carry fat in our 20s or 30s, it tends to be the subcutaneous fat, which is the regular type of fat. Now, unfortunately, as we get older, and especially for women when they enter and go past menopause, they tend to accumulate a lot more what's called visceral fat. Okay, visceral fat is quite different in more than one way, but specifically visceral fat, it behaves like an organ. Okay, so it actually starts to secrete some hormones into your body, which can actually act on your body in various different ways, and some of these ways are actually not very helpful for you. Specifically, visceral fat tends to release inflammatory chemicals or hormones. They can actually have an impact on your insulin, appetite, and even can amplify joint pain as well. So this was a little bit of a surprise to me when I found out this research, is that not all fat in your body is made equal. So visceral fat can actually have a significantly higher impact on your overall health than your regular subcutaneous fat. Now, I mentioned about visceral fat accumulating at a much higher rate in women, particularly as they go through menopause. Now, with men, this transition is more gradual. So men also tend to accumulate more visceral fat as we get older, but it happens more gradually. Whereas with women, once you enter the menopause, once you go through menopause, you tend to accumulate the visceral fat much more suddenly at a much higher rate. Okay, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So first of all, I want to describe and explain why visceral fat can be quite bad for your health. So first of all, visceral fat releases a steady stream of what we call free fatty acids and also inflammatory markers. They're known as cytokines, okay? So these fatty acids and inflammatory markers, they go directly towards your liver, and they interfere with insulin signaling in the liver area, which can lead to insulin resistance, which can also consequently lead to what we know as type 2 diabetes. Okay, so there's actually been a number of studies that looked at the connection between the amount of visceral fat in your body and your risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and the connection is very strong. In fact, how much visceral fat you have in your body is one of the strongest indicators of how likely you are to actually get type 2 diabetes. So definitely a very strong connection there. Now, another thing that's another negative impact that the visceral fat can have on your body is that it can actually increase your appetite. So if you're struggling with weight, if you're trying to lose weight, having more visceral fat in your body can actually lead to increased appetite and essentially overeating. Okay, so the way it does it, So I'll explain a little bit of background. So normal fat, your regular fat, releases a chemical called leptin. Okay, now it's called I'm full hormone. Okay, so it's a hormone that tells your brain, tells your body that you are full. It tells you basically to stop eating. Okay, now because people who are obese, they tend to be leptin resistant, so become resistant to this hormone. So they no longer feel full as much as other people. Now, the way people become leptin resistant is very often is because visceral fat releases these inflammatory chemicals or inflammatory markers that interfere with this process. It interferes with your brain, becomes leptin resistant. So if you have a lot of visceral fat in your body, it releases these inflammatory chemicals, which then interfere with the way your brain reacts to leptin. So it no longer feels full. And therefore, you tend to eat more because you're not feeling full, you're still hungry, and therefore it leads to obesity, being overweight, overeating, and so on. Okay, so now I want to caution you a little bit on this particular area, because this has not been proven beyond doubt, this link between visceral fat, leptin, and overeating, but there's a very strong indication at the moment in research. However, it hasn't been proven beyond doubt. Okay, so just keep an eye on this area if you're interested. I think hopefully in the next couple of years there'll be a little bit more research to prove this beyond any doubt. Now, another negative impact of visceral fat on your body is joint pain. So if you carry more extra weight, okay, clearly there's a mechanical effect on your joints, particularly in your legs, your knees, ankles, and hips, because that extra weight, it produces more stress on your joints, and that can often lead to increased wear and tear and pain, inflammation. But apart from the mechanical effect, there's also an inflammatory effect, okay? Because, again, visceral fat produces inflammatory markers which can have an inflammatory effect on your joints. Again, if you're having a bit of arthritis, that can actually exacerbate your pain and inflammation. So not only having extra fat in your body will actually cause more mechanical stress, but also if you have visceral fat specifically, it's likely to have a very sort of a significant pro-inflammatory effect on your joints as well. Now, I want to give you some good news as well, okay? So I guess you're probably wondering, what can I do to reduce my visceral fat in your body, okay? So number one is exercise. And the research shows that visceral fat responds to exercise faster than you will see on the scales. So what I mean by that is, quite often we have people who become members at our training facility, and if they start measuring their waist circumference, what they may see is that their waist starts to shrink before the kgs start to drop. Okay, so essentially, when you start training, you start to build a bit of muscle, which is great because it makes you stronger, but also it helps to increase your metabolism. Now, because muscles are quite heavy, that actually increases your body weight. But because you're burning calories, it will often help to reduce your visceral content or visceral fat. So you are burning fat, but you're also building muscle. Therefore, your kilos quite often stay the same for a period of time. But that's why it's very important to not just track your weight, but also to track particularly your waist and maybe your thigh circumference. So do a measurement around your waist and around your thigh. And you'll see that your centimeters are going to change quicker than your kilos. Okay? So exercise is definitely one of the primary measures or primary tools that you can use to reduce your visceral fat content. I want to caution you against a very common myth about fat in general, but also visceral fat. So quite often you might even see in TV commercials or other advertising, quite often these advertising ads, they will say, okay, do a lot of crunches or planks or some kind of core exercise to reduce fat, particularly tummy fat. Now, this is just simply not true, okay? So targeting your abdominal or stomach muscles is not going to reduce particularly visceral fat faster, okay? What you do need to do to reduce your fat content in the body is essentially aim to achieve what we call negative or essentially a calorie deficiency. So your calorie intake should be less or lower than your calorie expenditure. Okay, so you should be burning more calories than you ingest into your body with food. Okay, that is the primary target for you. Okay. And as I mentioned before, you should include at least 2 or 3 strength sessions per week, because muscle, not only it makes you stronger and improves your overall function, but also it helps to speed up your resting metabolism. So it actually helps you burn calories even when you are at rest. And it also helps to improve insulin sensitivity. So essentially having more muscle reduces the risk of you developing type 2 diabetes. So it kind of undoes some of the ill effects of visceral fat. If you're trying to lose weight, make sure that you're measuring your waist monthly, or at least monthly, or maybe sometimes even weekly. Don't focus too much on the kilos, although kilos can also tell you, it can help you track your progress as well. But I'd say, especially in the early stages, try and track your waist circumference more than the kilos, because that will give you a more accurate indication of how well you're doing. Okay. Now, on top of that, if you drink alcohol, wine, beer, whatever it is, okay, really try and cut down on that, because alcohol is very calorie dense, and it will make it a lot harder for you to lose visceral fat. Okay, especially we see it a lot with people over 50 having a glass of wine with dinner or on the weekends. Try to reduce it as much as you can. All right. I think this one piece of advice, if you do nothing else, it will actually go a long way. Okay. Now, another thing that I want to mention before we finish is sleep. Okay. So there's actually a lot of research on the effect of sleep deprivation and accumulation of fat, and there's definitely a very significant factor. So one specific study showed that short sleep is directly linked to more visceral fat. So if you're not getting good sleep, you tend to accumulate more visceral fat. So making sure that you develop a good, healthy sleeping routine, go bed at the same time, try and optimize your bedroom environment to keep you asleep the whole night. Do what you can. Do a bit of research on how to make sure that your sleep is good and it's healthy. It will actually, in a way, it will help you lose visceral fat as well. And the thing about getting good sleep as well is that you'll have more energy the next morning, and you'll be more likely to stick to your fitness routine. So if you have a bit of an exercise regime going on, quite often you might feel tired and you might skip some days because you feel too exhausted. And it's quite often because you're not getting good sleep, especially with people over 50. So getting good sleep will have multiple beneficial effects. It will improve your concentration, memory. It will give you more energy, so you're more likely to stick to your exercise routine. It will help you lose visceral fat. So it's like one thing, it feeds into the other. Okay, so good sleep will help you lose weight. It will help you feel better. It will make you stronger, essentially, by ensuring that you continue to exercise. So hopefully, guys, you picked up some golden tips from this episode. So my main goal was to make a distinction between normal subcutaneous fat and visceral fat, and how, as we get older, unfortunately, there's more. We tend to accumulate more visceral fat, but there are things you can do to help it. And you should be, especially if you are a bit overweight or obese, you should be addressing that as soon as you can, because if you don't, you certainly run a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and there's also it can have other major impact on your body. All right, all the best for now. Until the next, I'll speak to you on the next episode.